Pickers!
They're here.
All right, glad you made it. Welcome to Top of the Potters, the unmissable digest of the best recent podcasts from around the podcasting world. It's time to get a new heaping helping of podcasting magic. As we approach the end of the year, maybe there was recently something lurking just outside of your bubble, and maybe we caught it for you. Here is Top of the Potters. Come with me. Let's get sucked into the vortex of the podcast. Who's on first? Exactly. Rain Man and diner filmmaker Barry Levinson talks movies at Club Random. No, at the Quad Spot, top theoretical physicist Eric Weinstein shares sage words for Gen Z. New entry at number 3, philosopher Sam Harris engages in an existential AI aggro bout. Irvin FInkel takes our man Lex on a lexicographical journey through time. And in pole position, renowned theoretical physicist Edward Witten puts Einstein back in his Schrödinger box. But first, we're reminiscing about comedian Lenny Bruce.
No, he was, in many ways, to comedy what at the same era Dylan was to music.
Yeah.
You know, it just completely changed the game, or what Muhammad Ali was to sports.
Yeah.
And in a way, speaking out. I mean, nobody was ever an egomaniac, like right out front. Like every rap artist owes their something to Muhammad Ali. Nobody ever was just like blatantly immodest. And
True.
And he invented that and did it, of course, brilliantly, and had he needed to have to pull it off. I mean, it wasn't like he could fake it. He was great looking. He was a great fighter.
And he was a showman. The way that he was the way he would move around and back up and dance and all of that. You know, there were those breakthrough people that came along, and quite a few in the 60s, because the 50s were pretty much the same
Absolutely.
as the 40s, you know?
Well, yeah. You mean comedy-wise, show business-wise?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, in the 50s, television came in, and that was a great... The movies had not had a competitor like that before. They owned it. If you wanted to see something on film, you had to go out to the theater.
Yeah.
Now it's the complete reverse. You can see anything right in your bed. They've completely reversed it. But, I mean, the movies, as you know, I'm sure you're a historian of film, they did go a little mental in the early 50s because they were so afraid of television. So they thought they had to do some things to make the experience that different. And that's where you get like the Incineramascope or something.
Yeah.
Like when you see these movies that were made in that period on television, they have to do some kind of weird shit to it because it was shot like so wide. Like,
right.
We're not TV. You have to swivel your head back and forth to see everything we're showing you, right? Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West.
But that was later.
A great movie.
Yeah, that was later.
Oh, yeah, that's 1969.
Somewhere in there.
With Henry Fonda as the bad guy. And it's so perfect because Henry Fonda up until then was like, you know, cornflakes. I mean, just like the most American and...
But you know what's so amazing about the film is that there were Westerns, which had always been a popular form, you know, certainly in the 50s, into the 60s. And then you take this Italian guy who said, I'm going to make a Western. And you have an Italian sensibility that mixes with the American West,
Absolutely.
and you end up with something brand new.
Oh, yeah. No. Well, he looked at America as only an outsider sometimes can, you know, with a mixture of awe and also horror, you know, because that's who Americans are.
Fonda Bidozi. That was a nice chinwag to start us off. In Next, some young Indian podcasters did a fantastic job with their first illustrious guest. It's all about illusions.
Hey, George! Get out of here! What the Sam Hill you yelling for, George?
Those pedals! There they are!
Let's talk about how screwed you guys are.
Okay.
You guys are so screwed.
In what sense?
Gen Z. I don't know. I mean, I've got Gen Z kids.
Yeah.
And it's astounding the extent to which Gen Z in India parallels in some ways Gen Z in the States. it's like all of these systems are breaking down simultaneously. Obviously, the phone is at the heart of it.
Yeah.
And you guys know what it is that you're, quote, supposed to be doing. You're just not doing it. And you don't really have the abilities to do it. And, you know, of course, this is a new opportunity. Podcasting didn't used to exist.
Yeah.
But, like, your meaning is being attacked. Your meaning complexes are really difficult to build. And many of you are not really plugged in to the past. Like we were talking about this movie, and you know, I said, "What was the big song in it?" And you guys got it wrong. And it's sad in a weird way that you're not connected to history in a really profound way, because somehow the phone changed everything.
I think there's distraction whenever you want it or whenever you need it. And I could be sitting, I'll talk about myself, I could be sitting and I know, okay, this is exactly what I need to do today. This is what I need to get done. But if I choose to not do it, or if I am looking for a distraction, I can just pick this up and like that's 2 hours gone.
What do you think that is?
I feel like it's like just dopamine hits.
It's obviously the dopamine and stuff, but it's also like there's this crazy fear of missing out. Where it's like if I'm not online right now, I won't know what's going on.
If you look at, for example, Israel as a counter, Israel still has a pretty high birth rate.
Yeah.
And being about something, particularly in a moment where the world has gone stupid about Israel and all sorts of anti-Israel hate is everywhere and driven by propaganda in most cases, they feel very embattled, but they know who they are.
Yeah.
You know, and in large measures, I think it's really important that Gen Z assert itself and say, we're not falling for all of this nonsense.
I believe that it will reverse at some point.
Really?
Yeah, I feel like we'll go all the way south and then people will okay.
One of the things is you guys are entitled to illusions. And I think that one of the problems with authenticity is that you don't recognize the way in which illusions are necessary for scaffolding.
Okay.
So that, you know, if you have beliefs that aren't really true or really real, you can find that if you incorporate them into your psyche, that you end up building a reality that it sort of makes them true in arrears. So you assume something that wasn't true, like the one, the whole concept of the one.
Yeah.
If you believe in the one, you might meet a random person and make her into the one.
Yeah.
Even if she
projecting.
but that thing becomes true later.
Okay.
You know, and so the idea is that if you don't have room for illusions, then you can't actually build these ideas. And so in part, one of the things that I hope for you guys is that, you know, you stay off the cynicism of Reddit or whatever. And you're entitled yourselves to some positive illusions on which to scaffold your lives.
I hope some of the Gen Z demographic have their ears wired up. That was electric advice. Thanks, Eric. Next, Sam Harris has a disagreement about the future under AI with columnist and writer Ross Douthat. Who's correct, pod pickers?
Put the list back up.
No, we already tried that.
Put it up.
Yes, put it up.
5 numbers. It's got half the code.
There's already a lot of strain on very basic things like having friends, getting married, having kids. And when you add in, let's say, lots and lots of jobs disappearing and a kind of, you know, existential, metaphysical anxiety about AI being able to sort of substitute for things that we thought of as human distinctives, plus, you know, whatever other weirder forces come in. Yeah, I think it is a very difficult situation that people need to be prepared for, I guess is how I would put it. It doesn't mean that we're doomed at all, but some things are going to be doomed.
Yeah, so if you take the job piece, which is really the first point of concern for people, you imagine a world where something like UBI was the necessary response to all of the abundance that AI has created. So people don't have to work, everything has become like chess, which is to say the computers are better at everything or virtually everything that humans have used to do to work. But it seems to me we have a kind of ready sample of people, a fairly large population, if you look at it historically, who haven't had to work and figured out how to live reasonably or at least recognizably happy lives under those conditions. And those are, we call them rich people, right? Or the aristocracies of one flavor or another, right? People who really didn't have to figure out what to do that others would pay them for. Or if they did that early in lives, they got to in their lives, they got to a point where they didn't have to do it any longer. And then they had to figure out what to do with leisure. And it would seem very surprising to me if in the presence of unlimited leisure, we as a species and as a culture couldn't figure out how to enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be more pessimistic a little bit. I mean, first, I would say that in my my optimistic scenario for AI is a kind of middle ground scenario where, which I also think is fairly likely in terms of the capacities of AI to just sort of replace human labor. I think the people who think it's more likely to be a complement to various kinds of human labor, that you'll still have lots of people, working jobs and doing things in the world that earn money. I'm hopeful that is still the most likely pathway. One interesting model is the vision of something like Star Trek, right? Where you have this kind of utopian vision where apparently some form of, AI and things related to AI have relieved scarcity and want and so on. And that's a story that's all about human daring and mastery and accomplishment. But it does focus on people who are choosing to be explorers, who have set up a system where they're still in charge of the ship, even if the computer could make better decisions, right? There's never a moment where Kirk or Picard says to the computer, okay, you decide how to handle the Romulans, right? And then you also don't know, like, what is actually going on Earth? Are people just, people are just sort of hanging out? Like, everyone isn't doing space exploration. I think the question of what the average citizen of the Federation is doing with their life under Star Trek conditions is sort of the question that sci-fi speculative thought needs to reckon with in the sort of AI abundance scenario.
Only time will tell if we still have some left. Speaking of time, let's join Lex Fridman and his guest, the national treasure Irvin FInkel, as they ruminate on the linguistic history of mankind.
You've said that the development of cuneiform, of these tablets, of written language is one of the greatest, probably the greatest invention in human history. How hard do you think it was to come up with this? And we should make clear that very specific element of encoding sound on the tablet, that's the genius invention. Drawing a picture makes sense. Okay, here's, barley, here's the sun, here's whatever, the actual object.
Exactly.
But to actually write down sound is a genius invention.
I find it very bewildering that they started off with the least flexible and the least adaptable system of pictographs, and then they moved on to the sound. I don't know why they bothered with it. And my hunch is that the archaeological evidence that we have on this score is ultimately misleading, because I think that probably for a very, very long time before the Sumerians, people in the world of what we call the Middle East, were in contact, they traded, they probably even had wars, and they had messages between them. And I think there was a long-running system of communication between people who didn't share a language, for whom pictures would suffice. So if merchants come and they have 3 sheep to sell, so they draw 3 little sheep, you know how much it is and what they are and so forth. Yeah. And so I think that what happened with the Sumerians, with their pictographic signs, is that those signs are right at the end of a very, very, very long period of time when somebody thought, what we can do is take these stupid, inhibited, no smoking signs and write language.
Yeah.
That is what I think happened.
Is this a controversial statement?
Highly controversial. Highly controversial. Many assyriologists would leave the room.
Yeah.
I honestly believe that the people at this time were not stupid. They weren't gorillas. They weren't less advanced than we are. They were probably indistinguishable from what we are. So you have merchants and wanderers and people who see, let's go down the river and see where we end up. And people looking for money, looking for women, looking for everything. And that's surely how it was. But if you look at those Göbekli buildings with a sceptical eye, I mean, the finish of it is astonishing. The structure of it, the vision of it. So the workforce and the tools and the organization. You know, what do they do it with a megaphone? Your breakfast and all that kind of thing. No way. No way.
So that's a really controversial statement.
It is really controversial.
At the time of Göbekli Tepe, they may have been already a writing system.
There was. I mean, I am a great believer in Sherlock Holmes as a teaching system for intelligence and rationality and logic and thinking. I read those stories a million times when I was a kid. And the thing about them, one of the things which impresses me most of all was this point, quoted by Holmes, not original to him, that it is theoretically possible to infer the Niagara Falls from a raindrop.
That's a powerful statement.
It's a powerful statement. Well, that seal from Göbekli Tepe is a raindrop from which I infer writing.
Now this next video doesn't exist until you watch it, so please let me know what it was like in the comments. Here comes the top powder of the batch. We're getting spooky now, at a distance, with Professor Greene and the feted thinker and mathematical physicist, Edward Witten.
You know, Einstein famously had his issues with quantum mechanics, God playing dice, didn't like probabilities. But I think if you look at the history, what really troubled him was this idea of non-locality, that what you do in one location could have some weird quantum correlation with something at another location. Do you, in retrospect, do you consider that to have been a reasonable, rational issue that he was uncomfortable with?
Well, he's certainly correct that it's very strange, the nature of quantum correlations. It's also relatively clear that Einstein's hope to get rid of them will not bear fruit. The subject was understood much more deeply by John Bell in the 2000s, and experiment has shown that things are much worse than Einstein feared, frankly. So experiment has shown that quantum correlations do things that are much worse than what had Einstein upset.
And what about quantum mechanics itself? So there's another issue that many people have shown light on, the so-called quantum measurement problem. That, you know, you have a description of a quantum system in terms of, say, a probability wave. It's spread out. You measure the particle, you find it here. The wave has to somehow accommodate that new information. We often call it the collapse of the wave function to accommodate that. No one knows how or if this happens. Where do you come down on that kind of thinking?
Well, I don't consider the collapse of the wave function to be a useful concept, so I don't think that way. I think that, unfortunately, to seriously think about it, it's very eerie, because I think when you try to think seriously about what quantum mechanics means, the essence of it turns out to be the question of what it means to know something. And that's very strange. I can try to explain it. I'm not totally sure this will be understandable to all of you, but I'll try to make it so. What Bohr said was that when a measurement is made, the measuring device records the answer, and the physicist who looks at it learns the answer. But Bohr didn't say in what sense you're supposed to know what the measuring device said. But whatever the answer is, you're not supposed to know it by making a measurement of the measuring device. Because if you had to measure the measuring device, and then you'd have to measure the measuring device of that measurement, you'd soon get to an infinite regress. Bohr was not applying quantum mechanics to the observer. But Everett said justly, well, we are ourselves made out of atoms and molecules, so quantum mechanics must apply to us. And then he said, if you look at his paper, it's very interesting. He begins his paper by talking about quantum gravity. He says that in quantum gravity, especially in a closed universe, nobody can look at the world from outside. He criticizes Bohr because Bohr had a classical observer who was looking at the quantum system from outside. Everett wanted to rethink it with the quantum observer being part of the quantum system, the observer being part of the quantum system. So what Everett said was, the experiment is done, the measuring device records the answer, the observer looks at the measuring device and records the answer in his memory, or her memory, and there's what, he doesn't use the word entanglement in that paper, but nowadays we'd call it, it creates a quantum mechanical entanglement between the state of the measuring device and the state of the observer's memory. And then, and this is the key point, Everett says the observer knows the state of the observer's memory. In a sense, he didn't define, but not by measuring the state of your memory. That would have led you to the same infinite regress that Bohr was trying to escape. So for many years, I was very dissatisfied with this. But in recent years, I've actually had an afterthought. And my afterthought is that I don't know what's going on when we think we know something. So is it conceivable as a matter of biology and physics that we are accessing our memory in a way that isn't a quantum mechanical measurement? Or in what sense, what is happening when we think we know something? So,
wait, so are you saying that you think the solution to the quantum measurement problem might involve consciousness at some level?
I'm saying that I think you can't discuss it satisfactorily without discussing the conscious observer who's making the observations.
And do you have any thoughts on what consciousness or the conscious observer would be?
I share the views of most physicists that consciousness is purely emergent.
I think most physicists would agree with you that consciousness is some emergent phenomenon. We don't need anything else.
Yes.
Where do you then take that when it comes to human free will?
My interpretation of the statement that we have free will is that our actions are largely determined by the state of our brains. Now, that interpretation of free will would not make everybody comfortable, but I think, to me, that's the meaning of the statement that we have free will.
But of course, the state of your brain presumably is described by the equations of fundamental physics.
Yes.
So when you have a great breakthrough, Edward Witten, with that view, do you take credit in your? So is it the laws of physics that just chose you and through you yields this insight, or is it something that is intrinsically you?
Well, I don't worry about it too much.
If you really have no free will, I certainly expect to see you next time for another rundown of the best of the podcasting world. You never know what's going to happen in 2026. Now that we're all entangled with each other, it's a shame to say goodbye. Let's make it au revoir. As Groucho Marx said, time flies like an arrow. Fruit flies like a banana. The podcast world moves fast. We'll keep you caught up. Stay gold, Podbangers.